Early morning seminary teachers. Dear friends, there is a throne in heaven for you.
Welcome to Seminary Teachers Helping Seminary Teachers, the podcast where we share ideas, tools, and encouragement to strengthen your teaching and bless your students. Each episode will explore practical tips, inspired resources, and real experiences from the classroom, so you can feel supported and confident in your calling. Whether you're new to teaching or a seasoned instructor, we're here to help each other teach with power and joy.
Yep.
All right, this is gonna be different. This is a throwback to
You're
5 years
gonna
ago.
keep us side by side.
Yeah, man. Yeah, this is the Brothers Anderson. This is back to our original podcasting days, where our viewership it consisted of all of our seminary students. That was it, right? Although I think you did put it on a podcast system at one point.
That was the only place we could find a link to
Can we still find those old episodes? Are they?
I have them all. I have them.
No.
all.
Are they on the podcast, like the site that they were? You don't even remember. Where
I think they know. I think they are. Yeah. But you'd have to it's a weird hosting platform.
Yeah,
so.
It's not like we were on Apple Podcasts or anything.
No. We were not getting paid for our thoughts.
Although I was told by some feedback that I got from teachers this last week is they got a ton of ads on YouTube.
Oh no.
And I don't know what that means. Does
that mean they're going to start sending us a check?
I'll have to. I guess. Did we monetize without knowing?
I don't know.
So teachers, we're not monetizing. This is not priestcraft. We're trying to. This is for you, and I'll try to figure out if there's something I can do so that we don't have so many ads. But anyway, I apologize. All right. So Mason's out for today. Nikki may jump on if suddenly we go to 3 screens. She's just dealing with some stuff that needs to get taken care of. But here we go. This is the original right here. This is the.
I feel like I need to pull the sign down. We have those mustaches.
I have it in my office. Yeah,
that's right. I have mine here too.
So I feel like because it's just the two of us, maybe we ought to approach this differently, and let's just work through some of these lessons together, and just maybe that's what we ought to do. Maybe it's just kind of we'll take 5 or 7 minutes on each lesson and just kind of ask questions of each other and of the document.
So I have my first question for you.
Okay.
So here's the first question. We have been pretty heavy starting around section 50, I want to say. The whole lesson on how to deal with trials. I feel like we've done it.
Oh,
right?
We're going to do it again.
Oh, but we've done it, right? We've done the trial lessons. We've done the how do you deal with, and we're look at section 121 and 123 are written from a prison. And
right.
So it's kind of hard to make this topic fresh. So that's going to be my question to you is how would you make the topic fresh? We know it's relevant because trials are it's plan of salvation 101, right? We come to get a body and we come to be tested. That's 101.
Yeah.
So then how do you keep the topic fresh in such a way that we can see the intent of what Joseph is intending to communicate with these messages versus it's just another lesson on how to deal with trials.
Yeah. Because it's soaked in these sections, right? Just the first couple verses.
Section 123, that's all you're going to talk about is all the different ways your life can be hard.
So maybe this, because this week you've got basically it's 121 and 122. It does mention 123 in the first one, but you really are honing in.
You're going to get it in that first lesson.
Yeah. And then you got 2 life prep lessons, but one of the life prep lessons is teachings of church leaders. Okay. So maybe this is how I could do this so that I'm not rehashing something that I feel like you're right. We've done this a lot. And
make a list on the board of all the things that teenagers have troubles with.
Well, and that's what curriculum does, right? Curriculum's write the verses, where art thou? Or how long shall we suffer? Like whatever. It has a couple of phrases. Leave them up on the board and ask your students what are some things that could be happening in your life that would cause you to cry out with one of these things. Yeah, whatever. But the life prep lesson is teachings of prophets, teaching of church leaders. There is a talk that is quoted extensively in the curriculum. In fact, there's 2 clips from the talk that are in the curriculum. I wonder if the way, and I love how the talk actually really addresses these sections. He does it heavily from a church history standpoint. He really leans into some of those stories. But then he also gets into 3 lessons to be learned out of these sections. So my suggestion to make this feel not just a rehash and sloppy seconds of the doctrine of we all suffer, is using Elder Holland's 2008 speech to young single adults. It's called Lessons from Liberty Jail. And if you go to the curriculum, there's links to it. You'll find it. This would be perfect. In my opinion, if I was teaching, I would use his talk, follow the outline from Life Prep Lesson 210, the teachings of church leaders. I'd take his talk, I'd break it out into verses, into paragraph forms. It's because it's a BYU speech, it's a little bit longer than a general conference talk, just because. But
you can trim some paragraphs because he does his whole introductory spiel, and
you don't have to do the entire talk. You can, or just do the entire talk and you just don't address some of those paragraphs. But ready-made, he comes at it, tells really great church history stories to set it all up, and then he teaches 3 lessons, and the 3 lessons are basically from 121. Maybe it does get into 122. It does. It gets into 122. But the 3 lessons are great because you could be actually going from what he's saying, going right to the verses and using the verses to help emphasize what he's teaching, or what he's teaching to emphasize the verses. And basically you can do that first kind of cover lesson, 121 through 123, using a message from a church leader, and kind of 2 birds with 1 stone, but it kind of makes it fresh and new. That's what I would do. What would you do?
Well, and fortunately the curriculum allows for this because we have Doctrine Mastery. We have a Doctrine Mastery lesson for section 121, right? Many called,
right.
Fear chosen.
Which you're going to do that on lesson like second day.
Right. You're going to do that second day. So the other way to approach this is as an acquiring spiritual knowledge lesson. What are the 3 principles of acquiring spiritual knowledge, right? It's act in faith, view our questions and our challenges from an eternal perspective, and then using divinely appointed sources, right? And we could just use this as a review. I feel like most of our students are going to know at least this part of church history. Now, because you might be dealing with some freshmen,
they're going to know some of the titles and locations.
They're going to know Liberty Jail. And so, we would hope, and it's not a guarantee, that these are going to be stories that they're going to be already familiar with. So you might want to fill it out. You might want to just survey them a little bit. How many of you are familiar with what happened in Liberty Jail? How many of you have heard the stories? And so you could give a nice 5-minute kind of an overview. You can tell the story of George Hinkle. By the way, George Hinkle was a terrible person. I'm just gonna put that out there. The guy that I was doing some research, and like, all right, well, what's this guy's story post Liberty Jail? Did he ever feel bad? Did he come? Boy, he was not a good person. So, but you could use this as a way to say, all right, you guys know the story. Some bad things happened to the saints. They were forced to flee Missouri under an extermination order. Like, you want to talk about the worst possible kind of bad things happening to good people kind of a story. This is at the point of a gun being forced to abandon your home. all and entirely because of your religious beliefs, right? Michigan is still very present on our students' minds. They know what's going on in the world. And so we don't need to really come up with a case study. Just say, you guys, here's the facts. So if you were a person in 19th century Missouri, a member of the church, 19th century Missouri, here's the 3 principles of acquiring spiritual knowledge. What would you say or do or invite somebody to say or do to act in faith? How can an eternal perspective help in the situation? What would be divinely appointed? Like, you could do all those kinds of things and just kind of reiterate these important principles and let section 121 through 123 just be their guide. Say, all your divinely appointed sources are going to come from these revelations, right? Where are you going to see the perspective? Where are you going to see think celestial? Where are you going to see faith? And then maybe just kind of let them loose a little bit and have them. You could do it like, yeah, you guys are going to write a talk on how to endure trials. Okay, here's how we're going to do it. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, acquiring spiritual knowledge, maybe.
If you go down to the supplement in the curriculum of this lesson, it gives you a couple of verses to focus on, 7 and 8 in section 121 for principles of acquiring spiritual knowledge. But I actually like the second part too, because a part of acquiring spiritual knowledge is then being able to help other people. It's kind of like when you go to the the gospel library app and you go to the gospel questions section.
Yeah,
And at the very top, it's got, how do you find your own? But then how do you help other people? And they kind of do that in the supplement. So you've got principles of acquiring spiritual knowledge using D&C 121, 7 and 8. And it's trying to have that eternal perspective amidst suffering. But then the next one is helping others find truth. And it takes you to D&C 123, looking at verses 11 through 14. And then it has a couple supplemental verses. So that could be a great way. If you've not,
how would you help a friend?
Yeah. If you've not spent time in some of the doctrinal mastery reviews to talk about how to help other people find truth, that could be a good thing to do. And that would mix it up a little bit, especially when you're talking about maybe you're not suffering, but what if your friend's suffering and how to help them? So kind of how I'd approach that.
So at this point, let's give a little bit of context to these revelations, because I think you taught, last week we talked about putting our scriptures in their proper context.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when we tell the Liberty Jail story, that these revelations, we feel like, and I think our media does this as well. Like, Joseph's just having this really bad day in the prison. And he's peering out the window. Remember that? Like, he's peering out the window and, oh God, where art thou? And then like the clouds part and this ray of sunlight comes into the window and he hears God's voice, right? And we assume that that's kind of how we get section 121 through 123, right? We think it's just kind of this random, just it happens while Joseph's having a particularly bad day. Do you want to say anything on the appropriate contect of where we get these revelations?
I mean, there's a good part. Again, the curriculum, I think, does a pretty good job giving a variety of ideas, but it has a link right there in there for teachers. Go to chapter 33 in Saints, and you could probably go the end of chapter 32 and into 33, and it gives you a pretty stark setting for what they're experiencing, not just because they're in prison and what that looks like. It does. It paints a really vivid picture of what it's like to be in prison and the accusations and what they're being charged with, and what hope they have that they're actually going to get out of prison at all. But then also what's happening to the people at the same time of all of this, and where's even his family? Like, where's Joseph's family? So they paint a pretty good picture in 32 and 33, just letting you know this isn't just Joseph feels bad because he's arrested. He personally is suffering. The people who's closest to him are suffering. He actually is experiencing a loss of hope And he doesn't know what's happening to the saints as they're scattered all the way across Missouri and into Illinois. He has no idea what's going on. So if you want to, we talked last week a lot about the power of narratives and being able to tell the story properly so that we can dig a little bit deeper into these sections. You want to understand the first 8 or 9 verses of section 121. You probably need to spend a little bit of time in Saints chapter 33. How could a prophet have got somebody who's seen Jesus? Why wasn't he like Alma the Younger, where he's just like, listen, the Spirit constraineth me. God's going to show his power here. That's not what Joseph says. Joseph's like, where are you? And how long are you going to be away from us as we suffer these things? And so it's, I think going to the historical record could be really good in setting this up for the week.
The other part of the context is, and I'm trying to find it in the Joseph Smith papers, but I'm not finding it really quickly. Sections 121 through 123 are excerpts from 2 different letters that Joseph dictates to the church, and they're about 28 pages long. The combined of these 2 letters, March 20th and March 22nd, 28 pages, and we're just getting little bits and pieces. These revelations are not canonized until the 1870s, when, under the direction of President Brigham Young, Orson Pratt takes these letters and he picks and chooses what he deems to be really kind of like the meat of these letters. The letter is entitled "Letter to the Church and Edward Partridge," March 20th, 1839, and then there's a second letter that's followed up, letter to Edward Partridge in March 22nd of 1839, and what's kind of interesting is that we don't get to the "O God, where art thou" until several pages into this letter. In fact, let me just read like a paragraph ahead before we get to the "O God," right? Oh, this is really hard to find. Okay.
Yeah, those letters
And
are hard to
again,
read.
yeah, because there's no real punctuation here. And again, the cries of orphans and widows would not have ascended up to God. The blood of innocent women and children, yea, and of men, and also would not have cried unto God against them. Would It would not have stained the soil of Missouri, but oh, the unrelenting hand of the inhumanity and the murderous disposition of this people! It shocks all nature. It begs and defies all descriptions. It is a tale of woe and lamentable tale, yea, a sorrowful tale, too much to tell, too much for the comprehension, too much to think for a moment, too much for human beings. It cannot be found among the heathens. It cannot be found among the nations where kings and tyrants are enthroned. It cannot be found among the savages of the wilderness. Yea, and I think it cannot be found among the wild and ferocious beasts of the forest, that a man should be mangled for sport, women violated or robbed of all that they have for their last morsel of substance, and then be violated to gratify the hellish desires of the mob, and finally left to perish with that. Like, we haven't even gotten to, he's just laying out their argument. Right? They practice these things upon the saints who have done them no wrong, who are innocent and virtuous, who love the Lord their God, and were willing to forsake all things for Christ. These things are awful to relate, but they are verily true. It must needs be that offenses come, but woe to them by whom they come. O God, where art thou? And where is the pavilion that covereth thy hiding place? Right. And so then we get that gap, and then there's a big gap of another couple of pages where now, before we get to verse 7, where the Lord's response, we think that it's this continuation of, here's all my complaining, And then in the very next thought, here's the Lord's response. When in fact, we get this. We received some letters last evening from Emma, and one from Don Carlos Smith, and one from Bishop Partridge, all breathing a kind and a consoling spirit we were much gratified with. Their contents we had been a long time without information, and when we read those letters, they were to our souls as the gentle air is refreshing. But our joy was mingled with grief because of the suffering of the poor and much injured saints. And we need not say to you that that the floodgates of our hearts were hoisted and our eyes were a fountain of tears. But those who have not been enclosed in the walls of a prison without cause or provocation can but a little idea how sweet the voice of a friend is. One token of friendship from any source, whatever wakens and calls into action every sympathetic feeling, it brings up in the instant everything that is past. It seizes the present with a vivifying. I don't know what that word is. He spells it wrong. Of lightning, it grasps after the future with the fierceness of a tiger, right? And he's using all these, how great it is to get these letters. And when the heart is sufficiently contrite, then the voice of inspiration steals along and whispers, "My son, peace be unto thy soul. Thine adversity and thine affliction shall be but a small moment." And I think there's a moment there where we can just talk about how great is it to have a friend in these moments and we don't feel like we are alone. Anyway, I think the content or the context of these letters could be a way to maybe freshen the message that these sections in the Doctrine and Covenants might bring to us.
Yeah. So let me just ask you, if we were to you build into that and you are able to kind of paint the right picture, have those experiences, hyper focusing, moving from suffering, from maybe what Elder Holland was talking about in those different lessons, but now we go to the hyper focus in Doctrine and Covenants 121 and the doctrinal mastery.
Yeah.
Which is a change in tone. And if you were to go back and look at those letters, 28 pages, he changes his tone quite a bit. And here it changes from maybe from Elder Holland's standpoint, this is where it becomes a temple or a jail temple. How does he say it? Prison temple.
Yeah, prison temple.
Where suddenly now we're actually being instructed. There's actual some truths being taught to how to understand the priesthood and the power of the priesthood. So let me just ask you, in that lesson, it begins with a scenario. This is the scenario in the curriculum. Molly was recently called to serve in her class presidency. She wants to help the young women in her class, but is unsure how to do so. Okay. So that's a scenario. And maybe this is a question for you about the proper use of scenarios. It specifically says, you might use a short scenario like the following to create a discussion. Can we just talk best practices on scenarios, using those, especially if they're like the icebreaker at the beginning or the hook? What
Right.
would you say are some of the best practices of a good scenario to kind of begin a class? Is that too short, too simple, the one that they got in the curriculum? Like what do you think? What are your best practices?
I like it. I mean, it is a fairly relevant scenario in that, or at least it's recognizable as. But I don't know how. I I'm gonna throw it back at you. I don't know if I've got a good answer for you. What, I feel like there needs to be a little more meat on the bone.
So I'm using the chat bot. I'm gonna just do this in real time. Let me see if I can share my screen. Oops. Just because I immediately, that was my first thought was, well, maybe. So I just asked it the question, what are the best practices for using scenarios in beginning a lesson, right? Oh, excellent question. See, the chat bot always makes me feel good. Are you seeing seeing the thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So here are some things. You got to start with something relevant. Open with real life situations, something that youth can relate to, right? And then use open-ended questions and then connect to the scriptures. I actually like that. Obviously, there's going to be fill and apply as things kind of happen. But if we were to just use those, start with relevance, use an open-ended questions, and then connect to scriptures. Now, if I were to go back to the curriculum,
Is it a leap too far to connect Molly's desire to serve the young women in her class with Liberty Jail?
well, um, maybe if you're trying to connect her back to the suffering that they're experiencing in Missouri at the time. But again,
what suffering is Molly really suffering here?
and maybe this is the other side of like setting up proper context is all right, yesterday we talked about everything they're going through, but here's a moment of instruction. So now we get a little bit of the Lord shedding some light on Joseph. That's actually going to some interesting things happen after Liberty Jail. Like Joseph goes into extreme Zion building mode once we get to Nauvoo. And
he is a different person when he comes out.
Yeah, scholars they kind of lead all these different changes and roads back to Liberty Jail. That something clicked in his mind, and he's in an urgent.
Well, what clicks in his mind is at the end of section 123, where the Lord says, is it 123 or 122? Yeah, the end of 122. Thy days are known, and thy years shall not be numbered less. Historians have mentioned that Joseph, when he comes out of that, he tells others that he knows he's got 5 years left.
Right.
If you do the math, March of 1839, he dies in June of 18, little over 5 years, 5 years and about 2 months. But he knows that he is now under this sense of urgency, and he's gonna go. He's gonna teach the saints. The Nauvoo era is really, it's kind of this interesting dividing line between us and other Latter-day Saint Restoration churches. Most other churches, other breakoffs, they feel like Kirtland Temple is kind of the end of Joseph's prophetic calling. After that, they completely ignore Nauvoo teachings. They completely, the reason and their reasoning is the prophet went to prison because he was a fallen prophet.
Right.
He did not redeem Zion with Zion's camp like he ought to have. Therefore, not Liberty Jail is kind of the sign that he has lost the prophetic gift.
But to your question of, okay, now we gotta teach, we gotta be able to have an experience with teenagers with this. Your question of is using this scenario about Molly and her calling as a class president, is that too far a leap? When we're talking to youth and we're talking about the extreme suffering in Liberty Jail, that is a far leap. Like that is a huge jump. So the idea that you've got to be able to create, as it says in the chat, that you create.
Well, and then you last week we talked about, we don't want to take verses out of their context,
right,
for it to say something that it's not necessarily saying.
Right.
And this is one of those, right? The rights of the priesthood are inseparably connected with the powers of heaven. Great. What were priesthood leaders doing that led to this observation about how to use priesthood?
So there's some context to build into this. Absolutely.
But maybe the story is about how Molly wants to do things for the right reasons, but she is kind of forcing her agenda on others. She's been called, and now she feels like, well, I have all the answers. We don't want to make Molly out to be like an enemy, but can you think of times when somebody got put in charge of something? And maybe that's where we go, is because that's where we,
in the context of the verses themselves, right?
Yeah.
or Molly is in a class presidency and she
And if you
has
feel uncomfortable with Molly, change your name to Mike.
And maybe that, so the relevancy here, it's got to be relevancy on two sides. Number one, it's got to be relevant to the youth, that they can actually feel a connection to whatever the scenario is you're going to use. But it also needs to be relevant to the verses that you're about to use. So make sure that it connects to both sides. So I kind of working through that in my head. Maybe it's Molly is called to be a counselor in a class presidency. And in that situation, she's struggling to sustain the leader or the class president, or maybe the class president is kind of overruling everything, or maybe Molly herself is the president and she feels like she can't trust anybody else, so she does everything herself. Or like make it so that it's relevant, both that the youth have maybe had an experience with it, but that it also connects, because then you're going to go in here and you're going to learn that the rights of the priesthood are inseparably connected to the powers of heaven, right? And they cannot be controlled nor handled only upon principles of righteousness. And then 41 to 42, no power or influence ought to be maintained by virtue of the priesthood, only persuasion, long suffering, gentleness, meekness, love, makes the whole list.
Yep.
So if you're going to use, I guess this is my point. This is just a short little scenario training. Make it relevant so that the youth can kind of find a connection to it, but then make sure that it connects to what you're about to talk about in the scriptures. And in this case, that's what you're going to talk about.
So right? Here's an idea that I'm having. Tell me what you think of it. I remember a bishop teaching our ward council once that we have two kind of main focuses in the church. We invite all to come unto Christ, and we honor agency. Right. And those seem to be really, really super kind of, but honoring agency isn't just about, just being able to choose, right? Elder Bednar in this last conference said that it's called moral agency. And if you want to use like, synonyms to those two words, you come up with good and virtuous and positive works or actions. And so when we talk about honoring somebody's agency, how does Section 121 teach us about how we honor agency? Well, we still are going to try to persuade to do good and to do righteous things. We're going to use long suffering. We're going to give them lots of opportunities to practice it. We're going to be gentle in our approaches. We're not going to be heavy-handed. Meekness, which is a humility that also has power, but it's also an understanding that I'm not, I'm going to allow for God to work in your life. I'm going to use a lot of love and kindness, and we're going to use pure knowledge, and right, we're going to use all these positive things with what is the intent? We want to invite all to come unto Christ. But notice how Christ has never been heavy-handed about forcing people to believe in him. He just pleads with us. And so can we reshape the scenario then of, we want to do right, but we're not going to force people, right? We're going to honor their agency, but we're going to honor that agency through these more Christ-like attributes.
So I have this quote. This is from President Faust. And maybe this is a good way to start this discussion off, because I feel like what we're trying to what you and I are trying to wrestle with is how do we, what framework do we actually start this one off on?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is what he says. He says, we are called when hands are laid upon our heads, but we are not chosen until we have demonstrated to God our commitment, faithfulness, and righteousness. With me, that's the other way around. Until we demonstrate to God our righteousness, faithfulness, and commitment.
That's a good way to start a class. Let's
put that on the board. And maybe
let's just put that on the board and just let people sit with it for a second.
Because I think immediately in my own mind's eye, I look at these verses and I'm thinking already principles of leadership. That's kind of what I'm thinking. That's probably not always the context here. I think it's anytime you're trying to exercise God's power to bless the lives of others. But I think just to keep it nice, neat and clean, I'd probably say, all right, you're called, you're set apart to lead out in some form or fashion. How do we do this? That's a good quote from President Faust. I don't have where that came from, but I have it in quotations. What I love about 35 through 45 is it is a series of one-liners, right? Like
yeah.
this could be a really great
Amen to the priesthood.
search and find kind of a class where you give them a block and you have them comb through the verses. Oh, good. Nikki's here.
Hi.
Hey, Nikki, I'm going to throw you right into the fire. You ready for this?
Okay, I'm
We're
ready.
already recording, so go.
Zero context. Don't cuss. The camera's going. Okay.
Oh, you know me so well.
Okay, so Nikki, in DNC 121, this is the doctrinal mastery, right? It's 36, 41, and 42, but really it's 35 through 45. Okay, DNC 121. I'll let this like settle into your brain. Do you view this as a leadership training? Or how do you, when you look at these verses, this is the powers of the priesthood are inseparably connected with the powers of heaven. Like, what is your knee-jerk like boundary to these verses that you would use to launch off into a class?
I hadn't thought about leadership training.
Oh, really? So what do you think?
Where did your brain go when you hear many are called and few are chosen? Where's your initial reaction? What are we talking about?
My personal testimony of Jesus Christ. And
Wow.
I connect it to Doctrine and Covenants section 84 because I've had a hard time a little bit figuring out my place. And as President Nelson has invited us to pray and read certain things, when I read 121:36, it's just really all about how I see God's power in my life and how it being connected with heaven means that the chosen comes as I connect to my mission, just like Jesus Christ connected his mission. Connecting to my mission helps me connect to the power of God and how to use it, and how to be chosen in it.
Okay, so let me keep asking the question then. So in the curriculum, it gives a scenario to start off with. So my question is, I'm going to read you the scenario. You tell me, because their scenario kind of connects to leadership. So what scenario would you use for the, because I think your emphasis is fantastic.
The hook. We're asking about the hook of how you're starting the lesson.
So if yours is more about personal testimony of Christ, so this is the scenario the curriculum has. Molly has recently called to serve in her class presidency. She wants to help the young women in her class, but is unsure how to do so. What advice would you give Molly if she asked you for counsel?
We also need to warn you that we've already gone 10 minutes into talking about why we don't like that scenario.
We've actually connected with that just now. So
No, you don't change your mind. You tell me, like, how would you do a scenario that has to do with what your thoughts were when you read the verses?
Power.
Well, for some reason, when you were reading this scenario, I was thinking of her personal relationship with Jesus Christ and her ability to be called to act under the priesthood keys, to do good, to build up the kingdom, to build Zion. So I'm not.
You like it for the same, for your same emphasis.
Yeah. If I was to think of another scenario, I would probably go along the lines of, how connected am I really to the choices I make and the power that God gives me? So something along the lines of, I don't really think my choices are that big of a deal, but at church or with my parents, they're always saying that these choices matter. I don't know. I might do something along those personal lines of personal righteousness and action.
You know what I love about that, Ricky? Is you and I just kind of bounced a bunch of ideas, and Nikki comes in completely cold and adds like a third just incredible way of looking at this. Teachers, you don't have to do any of the things that we're bringing up. Hopefully it's inspiring your own personality, and as you read and study scripture and pray about your students, it's going to lead to these kinds of additional different ways of approaching it. So that's the thing I loved what Nikki just brought, is a fresh perspective that you and I just hadn't even considered yet at this point.
Can I keep going?
Yes.
Okay. I feel like this week has the potential to just be a lot about God's power and relationship with us individually. When we're looking at Joseph Smith's response, the first part of section 21, where he's like, "Where are you, Lord? Why aren't you here with us?" And there's just this, he's uncertain about, he knows his relationship with God, and he's had a lot of really cool experiences that have taught him that God is there. But that first part, and then if you go to section 123, have either of you talked about this yet? Tell me if you have.
You keep going. You're riding the wave.
123 verse 17. Here is his, so something happens in these sections. It's so powerful when you're bringing up 121 and even leadership and how people are to behave if you're with God. Look at verse 17. He goes from "where are you" to verse 17. "Therefore, dearly beloved brethren, let us cheerfully do all things that lie in our power, and then may we stand still with the utmost assurance to see the salvation of God, and for his arm shall be revealed."
Kind of good
For his arm
bookends,
to
yeah.
be revealed. Yeah, that is beautiful to look now, send our students into the scriptures and see what did the Lord teach him? What power did,
changed?
yeah, what changed? How did Joseph Smith, what did he remember from past things of ways that God showed up to just having this conversation with the Lord? And we know that Liberty Gel is one of those things that a lot of people in the church know about, and we talk about it because of the powerful change that it had in Joseph Smith and how what he's going to have to face between now and then also his death is just really beautiful. Yeah.
This is good. This is good. Now, there's lots to be said, I think, in for section 121 towards the end with that doctrinal mastery. Do you remember the old curriculum? There was something great. It was a lamp metaphor. Do you guys
I
remember
love
that?
that.
Plugging into the power source.
Yeah, you had a lamp and it had a cord and it had a little switch on it and it was plugged into the wall and you had to like figure out. That was always my opener for this. Was
Yeah.
I would draw it out on the board and I would say, "All right, guys, this is a metaphor for us connecting with heaven."
Mhm.
Let's read through the verses. There's some elements to this. "Can you label my lamp picture?" Right. And it was, the wall socket was the power of heaven, and the cord connecting it to the lamp is the priesthood. The little switch on the cord is actually the principles of righteousness, and that the lamp itself is the blessings of the priesthood shedding its light on you and on other people. And the fact that just because you've got a cord plugged into the wall doesn't mean you're automatically going to go ahead and shed those blessings, but you actually, through the principles of righteousness, you're switching it all on, right? I always thought that was fun. I thought it was a great way to make that connection and ways that you can whatever. But to Ryan's point, now we go to 122, which is, those are the lessons, right? It's 121 through 123, kind of covers all of it. Then you hyper focus on doctrinal mastery. Then you go to 122, which is, surprise, surprise, afflictions will be for our good, which we've talked about a lot this semester. Like it's a lot of things. So is there a way to do 122 in a way that is not just regurgitating truths that we've already identified previous sections? What are your thoughts? What do you do different here that is unique to this section that's different than maybe some of the other previous ones that we've done? Because we talk about afflictions a lot.
I think my brain, Nikki brought up the whole idea that this week can be about, connecting to God's power. Verse 8 seems to be kind of the hinge point for all of this, right? "The Son of Man hath descended below them all. Art thou greater than he?" And there's this really great opportunity. Now let's really hyper focus on Christ, and let's talk about why he suffered for, this links us to Alma chapter 7. It links us to a lot of really great, Hebrews talks a lot about, the sufferings of Christ, and First Nephi, the vision chapter 11 specifically, where it talks about the condescension of God. And so what is it about the suffering servant, Isaiah 53? There's just a ton of different places where we can go where it just really feels like Christ is emphasizing the cross. I came to be lifted up so that all men could look unto me and live, right? This repeated message over and over and over and over again of Christ's suffering. So, but why? Why does there so much emphasis there? And this is where it just really feels like this is where the reality of where the power comes, that we're not in this alone. Like if we go back to this original letter that Joseph pens, and we talk about how great it is, how we were so gratified with the content of their letters, right? It was the voice of a friend is this token of friendship that awakens and calls into every action, every sympathetic feeling that it brings up. How good does it feel to know that there is a friend that's in this, whatever the trial is, that's in it with us? The Son of Man descended below them all so that he could raise us up. He is that friend. And so where can we go? I guess that's the next question then, is what is the way to kind of begin this conversation of
that's a good part in the curriculum, down where it says remembering Christ in our affliction. It has a little search activity, which I think is great, where you're going to spend time in 122, 8 through 9. And then you're going to go to Alma 7, 11 through 12, right? And you're going to make that connection, which is kind of what you reference. And then this really great quote from President Eyring, talking about when you wonder how much pain you can endure, well, remember him. He suffered what you suffer so that he will know how to lift you up. He may not remove the burden, but he will strengthen and comfort you. You being nourished and comforted by a loving Savior who knows how to succor you in whatever test you face. And then it asks the really great questions of how could it be helpful to you during your trials to know that Jesus Christ has descended below them all. And why do you think he would do that? And what other scriptures come to your mind? And like there's a really great, that's a little learning experience that I think is just ready right there in the curriculum.
It almost feels like it's a continuation of the principles of acquiring spiritual knowledge.
Yeah.
Right. This is the part where we are helping others. We're trying to point them to those eternal perspective, and we're trying to point them to the divinely pointed sources. We're trying to help them to maintain the faith that even though it just feels like the jaws of hell gape open, like our lives, it just feels like it's so encumbered by darkness. There is a light.
Yeah. Nikki, what do you think about this? How do you feel about 122?
I feel like I don't know what else I would say to that other than my first initial thought is we repeat these things a lot because a relationship with Jesus Christ is for our youth something that maybe they're still working on connecting with. So I might read verse 8, descended below them all, art thou greater than he, and put Christ in this position that I just can't feel or relate to. Or I don't know, I feel like anytime we talk about him and what he's done for us, we might get this weird feeling of, well, why would he do it for me? And just, so there never can we talk enough or too much about that. And when I think about the question, Son of Man hath descended below them all, is an invitation to recognize how low, when we are low, he connects with us. And then, art thou greater than he, is a question that allows us and the youth to just check in. I trusted him on these things lately a little bit more. Yeah, because I feel like we do have to repeat this relationship with Jesus Christ as often as we can, and we should see it every week because I don't know that they do. Yeah. And maybe even some good find out questions to find out where their relationship with Jesus Christ is at.
Instead of we got a couple of invitations from conference as well to that point about like we got to continue nourishing the testimony.
Yeah.
Like we got to reconnect with him regularly or else we miss that. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's verse 7 where it says, after he gives all those ifs, if the billowing surge conspire against thee, if fierce winds become thine enemy, if, then he says, know thou, my son, that all these things shall give thee experience and shall be for thy good. And he has said versions of that phrase in a couple other places in previous sections, but it's pretty poignant here in verse 7 as he lays out all those things. One of my very favorite church video shorts is God's Will, and it's in the supplement. If you go all the way down to the supplement of the curriculum, you have Elder Christofferson telling Hubie Brown's story of the current Bush and then his experience in his own personal trials. I love that video. It's one of my favorites.
One of my teachers told me that she has a student that will try to force that story into every one of her lessons because he loves it so much.
Well, here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner.
Here we go. In fact, I heard that quoted in sacrament meeting just 2 weeks ago before conference, and fabulous story. And it's a great way to actually demonstrate what it's meant when he says, all things shall give thee experience and shall be for thy good. So good stuff. Good stuff.
Hey, I'd like to share one more thing that's a half-fixed idea.
Great.
You know the section 123, verse 16?
Yeah.
The helm, small helm in the time of a storm by being kept workways with the wind and the waves. When I'm thinking about relationship with Jesus Christ in verse 8, we're not really doing 123 yet, are we?
It's kind of a part of the first lesson. It's kind of part of the 121. Yeah.
So well, anyway, I'll just carry on with my thought and you can do with it what you want. But I love the idea of us being this idea of what is the helm or what is the center of our belief and how we trust the Savior. And when we think about him, what was his center? Well, his was God. And so his ability to go as low as he did, but also succor the way that he does for each of us. For us, the helm, it's the verse for me at the end says, by being kept workways with the wind and the waves. It's almost as though if your center is, you can really kind of go with the flow of the trial and the affliction because you're still center in Jesus Christ. And that's what Joseph had to do. He wasn't going to get himself out of Liberty Jail in the moments of receiving the revelation. There was still going to be really hard things. The winds, it's like the story of Peter walking on the water, John 14, maybe, where it talks about how he sinks. And then when the Lord picks him up, they walk back to the ship and the storm doesn't stop until they're in the ship. Right. It's the same idea and concept of youth having a relationship with Jesus Christ, but being centered somewhere. Almost like Elder Brown's talk during conference when he talked about the testimony, the power behind just not giving up on the testimony that you do have, something along lines, even with that verse 16 in section 123.
Well, I think we don't give 123 a lot of attention in these lessons this week.
Some powerful things in there.
But there's some good stuff. Like you could start at 15 and 16, right? Let no man count them as small things, right? And he says your future is going to depend on these small things, and so these small efforts that you and I bring are going to be like a helm of a large ship. And I like how it says, in the time of a storm, being kept workways with the wind and with the waves. The helm's going to do its job because of the wind and because of the waves. That's actually going to propel the ship forward. So he's actually putting another element to this idea of all these things will be for your good. It's like a ship in the ocean. If you had zero wind, your boat would go nowhere. If there were no waves, you would go nowhere. You would just kind of sit there and spin in place. And so I love how he throws that in there. It's like a small helm, and it works. It is being kept workways with the wind and the waves. That's how you're going to move forward. So I love that element. Maybe that's a good connection to the end of 122, because we don't get to put a lot of emphasis there. All right. So can we talk the last life prep lesson?
Yeah. Do you feel like it's a good fit? This is an interesting
Divine nature and destiny.
divine nature and eternal destiny. Is this a good place for it? Where would you go, Nikki, to connect this with the rest of the week?
Yeah, I would just, in relationship with Jesus Christ, how powerful it is to be connected to how you were created and how he feels about you.
Yeah.
And in all the storms and the trials, and how do you keep linked? Well, President Nelson's, of course, the talk of divine, the identities that are going to matter most to you, child of God, child of the covenant, and disciple of Jesus Christ. I would definitely touch on that. Elder Uchtdorf's, he does a great job in the video, the Swan video that's in the curriculum. But I think purpose for youth today, it's really great to talk about it as much as possible. And what is it going to look like tomorrow when so-and-so does something, or when you don't make the volleyball team, or, having connection to identity and purpose is so relevant. I think it fits with 121, 100%.
Do we do choices for eternity anywhere this semester? Or is that actually the coming year?
It was an option to talk about it, wasn't it, during one of our other life prep lessons?
One of our other
it's lesson 211, teachings of church leaders. I think we did it in the first semester.
Yeah.
So it's in there barely in the curriculum. If that was not something that you were able to spend very much time on, I feel like I feel like they didn't emphasize it here because there's a specific lesson for it. So if as a teacher you didn't do choices for eternity, this may be just one of those lessons where you bring that out and you spend a lot of time with President Nelson talking about those 3 divine labels. And our youth will eat that up. We live in an age of identity politics, and people take things and that's how they identify themselves. It's their whole selves. And he says labels are not necessarily bad, and he teaches about the labels that are most important. So if you haven't done that, this is a good place to plug that in.
We just want to remind you that these life prep lessons, the 3 Ps, right? Look at the purpose statement in that first paragraph. This is what we're trying to accomplish. We want to get really as quick as we can to the principle so that we save as much time as possible for the practice.
Right. And they do get to the practice quick here. They give you another scenario, and then immediately give you kind of a learning experience, whether you turn this into a handout or whatever. But there's quotes from President or Elder Uchtdorf connected to some verses. Actually, that's what it is. 1, 2, 3, 4 quotes, and then they're connected to verses, and then a discussion that's based off of what you learned. So it's pretty straightforward. I like this life prep lesson. I don't know. Is there anything you guys would change from it? Is there anything you would add or subtract from it?
Maybe the only thing I would add is in the beginning discussion, after we've discussed the importance of identity, whether it's the choices for eternity or knowing our divine nature and identity, sometimes it's important for us to have a conversation where we peel back the curtain and just, can we talk honestly about the challenges? What are the roadblocks, the obstacles, the things that are preventing us from being able to see ourselves in the way that God sees us? And why do you feel like that is such an active attack method that Satan uses? If what is, like, connect the dots. If Satan can get you to doubt who you really are, then what? And really, so I might just have a discussion there just so we understand those evil tactics, so we can plan better for how we're going to overcome it.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I talk about revelation, we always include the one tactic of Satan will use the, I am not beautiful, I am not fast enough, I am not
good enough. Yep.
And what will the Lord send? Any of those messages that are degrading or unkind or just you not measuring up are not from the Lord. The Lord will send, you are a child of God. You are created divinely. You are fabulous. There'll always be things, feelings and thoughts that help you move forward in your potential. There's so many good videos in this lesson. I love Elder Rudd's, Elder Taylor's. They just have so many good examples and points. It's a great lesson.
Okay. Well, anything from the week that kind of completes it, unless you If you don't use the messages from church leaders to kind of start off the week, like was suggested, then we just had a wonderful conference, and identify one of those powerful talks. You may actually do a little bit of legwork and ask your students which ones were powerful to them and what they would like to study together as a class. And if you don't choose to do lessons from Liberty to start us off, and you want to do this here, by all means, do something that's relevant to them, and something that's helpful from this most recent conference. So.
And then you might have mentioned this, but with the first presidency being announced here pretty soon, if you have any wiggle room in your week, I think it is 100% vital to introduce them to the new presidency and talk about whatever they want to talk about, and that even a little bit of their biographies or things that they've talked about in the past. Show them how to go find talks in where it breaks up just who the speaker is. Because these ones that are called, however long they're going to serve, are integral for them. Think about who the prophet was when you were in high school and making all of these really big life decisions. You remember, because he was the mouthpiece of God during those really trying times.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. At the time of this recording, we're still before that announcement. I always like to rewatch those types of announcements. I was in seminary when President Monson passed away. And I remember we watched his President Nelson's
Life.
at least part of the announcement.
You were teaching
in the temple.
seminary. I was going back. I was like, you were in seminary then.
No, I was teaching it. This is 2018. I know I look young, but it's just 2018. What did Mason call me? He called me.
I was trying to think. I was like, no, I was your seminary teacher. He wasn't even president of the church.
No. But like I made it a point. I showed all my classes at least a segment, especially his invitations.
Yeah.
Like President Nelson came in with, "We're in the temple and we're focusing on the covenant path. Please get on the covenant path." And it was a really great discussion to have. So, so yeah, exciting times. Other thoughts? Final thoughts as far as this week's concerned?
We love you.
Amen.
Hey, if you have questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us.